Rain is falling over the outskirts of Newport, Rhode Island, at exactly 3:17 a.m. Not the soft rain of comfort, but a heavy, insistent downpour that turns the gravel driveway into a mirror of broken reflections. Lightning splits the sky for a brief second, revealing the silhouette of a mansion that once defined American excess. Now it stands hollow, its windows dark sockets, its stone facade streaked with decades of salt air and neglect. Inside, a woman stands alone in the grand foyer. Her name is Evelyn Hartwell, though once newspapers called her the Queen of Atlantic Wealth. Her hands tremble as she holds a folded legal notice soaked at the edges. The ink has bled slightly, but the message is still legible. Foreclosure, final eviction, asset seizure. The Hartwell estate, once valued at nearly $180 million in pre-depression currency, equivalent to well over $3 billion today, has been declared legally abandoned. Around her, silence presses in like a physical weight. The chandelier above, once holding 10,000 hand-cut crystals imported from Bohemia, hangs crooked, one chain snapped. Each drop of water that leaks through the damaged roof echoes through the marble hall like a ticking clock counting down something irreversible. She looks up. The ceiling dome, 80 feet high, painted with a mural of mythological gods, has begun to peel. Zeus's face is half gone, and in that moment, Evelyn whispers something no one hears. We built a kingdom and forgot to build it for people. Outside, thunder rolls again, but the story does not begin here. It begins 57 years earlier, when wealth was not yet a curse, but a dream still disguised as innocence. In 1928, in the industrial heart of Pennsylvania, a boy named Jonathan Hartwell is born into iron and soot. His father works 12-hour shifts at a steel mill. His mother washes clothes for railroad workers. Their home is a two-room structure that smells permanently of coal dust and boiled cabbage. Jonathan grows up learning two truths. First, money is survival. Second, survival is never enough. At age 9, he watches a foreman drive past in a black automobile so polished it reflects the sky. That moment, reportedly, changes something irreversible in him. He later writes in a school essay, preserving county archives, that glass separates those who live from those who only endure. By 16, he leaves school. By 18, he is working at a shipping yard, counting cargo crates under flickering floodlights. The air tastes of salt and rusted metal. His hands bleed often, but he does not stop, because Jonathan Hartwell has already decided something the world does not yet know. He will not stay poor. He will bend the world until it makes space for him. Years pass in repetition, steel, sweat, silence. Until 1953. The Korean War has reshaped global trade. Supply chains fracture, rebuild, fracture again. Jonathan notices something others ignore. Inefficiency creates opportunity. While others see chaos, he sees gaps. He borrows $800 from a local lender. Money his mother pleads him not to take, and buys a used cargo truck that smells of gasoline and old leather seats. His first business is simple, transporting steel parts faster than union-controlled companies allow. He drives through the night. Rain hits the windshield like static. Coffee burns his throat. He sleeps in the driver's seat, engines still warm beneath him. And slowly, almost invisibly, the money begins to multiply. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like a river carving stone. By 1958, Hartwell Logistics exists on paper. By 1962, it owns 15 trucks. By 1968, it owns warehouses along the East Coast. Jonathan is no longer just a driver. He is a system. And systems, unlike men, scale without limits. But success has its own quiet distortion. People begin to speak differently around him. Meetings become quieter when he enters. Even his mother, when visiting his new office in Philadelphia, a glass tower overlooking rail yards, hesitates before sitting on the leather chairs. You smell like money now, she tells him once. He laughs. But that night, alone, he wonders what that means. Because money, he realizes, does not smell like anything. It erases smell altogether. In 1971, Jonathan meets a woman who will change the architecture of his life. Her name is Margaret Vale. She is the daughter of an art historian and a failed architect. She speaks softly but observes sharply. When she enters a room, she does not look at the furniture. She looks at the space between objects. They meet at a charity gala in Boston. The air smells of champagne and lilies. Glass clinks constantly, like distant bells. Jonathan notices her because she is not impressed by him. Everyone else is. She asks him a simple question. Why do you want more? No one has ever asked him that. He answers honestly. Because stopping feels like dying. Margaret does not smile. That's not ambition, she says. That's fear wearing expensive clothes. And somehow, that insult becomes the beginning of everything. They marry within 2 years. Not because they are alike, but because they recognize each other's contradictions. He builds outward. She builds inward. He expands cities of commerce. She studies emptiness inside architecture. Together, they become something rare in post-war America, a power couple not defined by scandal, but by scale. And then comes the mansion. It begins as a sketch on thick ivory paper in 1974. Jonathan wants a house. Margaret wants a statement. What emerges is neither. It is something closer to obsession made concrete. Construction begins in 1976 on 42 acres overlooking the Atlantic coast. The land alone costs $12 million. Workers arrive from Italy, France, and New York. Marble is imported from Carrara. Oak beams from reclaimed European castles. Stained glass windows designed by artisans who previously worked on cathedrals. The mansion is not built. It is assembled like a myth. 88,000 square feet, 110 rooms, 7 levels, including subterranean tunnels reportedly designed for private security and emergency evacuation. But numbers alone do not capture it. The exterior is neoclassical but distorted. Columns too tall, arches too wide, proportions almost dreamlike. Like someone tried to reconstruct Rome from memory after forgetting half of it. At night, floodlights turn the facade into a glowing monument visible from ships miles offshore. Locals begin calling it the lighthouse of excess. Inside, each room is a philosophy disguised as wealth. The grand foyer, marble imported from Greece, cold enough to numb bare feet. Echoes stretching so long conversations feel like they arrive from another century. The library, 40-foot shelves, spiral ladders, books bound in leather that smells of cedar and dust. Jonathan never reads here. Margaret does. The dining hall, a table stretching 60 feet, carved from a single slab of walnut. It takes 12 men to move it into place. No one ever sits at both ends during the same meal. The conservatory, glass dome filled with exotic plants maintained at tropical humidity. The air here is always warm, almost suffocating, like breathing inside a living organism. The master suite, designed less as a bedroom and more as a private world. Velvet curtains imported for France. A bathroom with gold-plated fixtures. A balcony overlooking the ocean where Margaret often stands alone at dawn. But the most controversial space lies underground. The tunnel system, officially described as service corridors. Unofficially, rumors suggest escape routes, secure archives, and even a private vault containing artifacts and cash reserves worth tens of millions. No one has ever confirmed, but no one has ever fully denied it either. As construction progresses, cracks begin to appear, not in the stone, but in the people. Jonathan works more, sleeps less, begins speaking in numbers instead of sentences. Margaret withdraws into silence, spending hours in unfinished rooms, touching walls as if listening to them. They stop eating together, then stop speaking entirely. Yet the mansion rises, and with each new wing, something else quietly collapses. In 1983, construction completes. The final cost, $96 million at the time, equivalent to over $300 million today, not including furnishings. A private orchestra plays at the opening gala. Politicien attend. Business leaders toast. Champagne flows like liquid light. But Margaret is not seen for most of the evening. She is in the East Wing. standing in a half-finished room that was originally intended to be a children's nursery. There are no children, only silence. She places her hand on the wall and says quietly, "It's too big to hear itself think." Jonathan, meanwhile, stands at the center of the ballroom, surrounded by applause that sounds distant, like it belongs to someone else. He should feel victorious. Instead, he feels strangely absent from his own life. And still, this is the peak. The Hartwells own logistics empires, shipping ports, and real estate across 3 continents. Their mansion becomes a symbol of American post-industrial power. Wealth not just accumulated, but displayed as architecture. Guests describe it as breathtaking, but also unsettling, because nothing inside it feels human-scaled anymore. Time behaves differently in the Hartwell estate. Rooms are too large for conversation. Hallways too long for urgency. Even footsteps feel delayed, as if the building processes sound slowly. And then, fate begins its quiet work. It starts in 1987 with a shipping dispute, a miscalculated contract, a diverted cargo route, a lawsuit that escalates beyond expectation. Hartwell Logistics, once unstoppable, becomes entangled in international litigation. Then comes the market shift. Containerization evolves. Competitors modernize faster. Jonathan resists change, believing scale will protect him. It does not. By 1991, debt accumulates silently like dust in sealed rooms. Margaret notices first, but Jonathan refuses to listen, because admitting vulnerability, for him, feels like dismantling identity itself. Inside the mansion, maintenance is reduced. A pipe leaks in the west wing, not repaired. A section of roof tiles slips during winter, ignored. A chandelier loses 3 crystals. No replacement ordered. Small things. But in structures this large, small things are how collapse begins. Margaret grows ill during this period, not physically at first, but emotionally. Witnesses say she stopped attending public gatherings entirely. She would walk the corridors at night, barefoot, listening to the building settle, as if waiting for it to speak. Then, in 1994, the Hartwell empire formally declares bankruptcy restructuring. The news spreads quickly. What once was untouchable becomes vulnerable. Banks arrive. Inspecteurs arrivent. Lawyers arrivent. And for the first time in decades, the mansion is no longer a symbol of power, but evidence of risk. Jonathan stands in his office, looking at financial statements spread across a mahogany desk. Numbers no longer represent growth, only loss. Margaret sits across from him. "You built walls," she says softly, "but forgot to build stability." He does not respond. Outside, rain begins again. Years pass in erosion. By 2001, most assets are liquidated. Shipping companies sold. Warehouses closed. Investments dissolved. Only the mansion remains. Too expensive to maintain. Too iconic to destroy. And so it decays slowly, like something too beautiful to abandon, but too costly to preserve. Jonathan Hartwell dies in 2007 in a private hospice wing. Ironically, inside the same estate he built to symbolize permanence. Margaret survives him by 8 years. She refuses to leave the mansion. Instead, she lives in 3 rooms only: the library, a small kitchen, and a sunroom overlooking the ocean. The rest of the house becomes memory. By 2015, maintenance ceases entirely. Water infiltrates foundations. Mold spreads in unused wings. Electrical systems fail in sections, leaving portions of the mansion in perpetual darkness. Locals report seeing lights flicker in empty rooms, but no one confirms occupation. And then we return to the beginning, to Evelyn Hartwell, standing in 2026 inside the collapsing foyer, holding the final foreclosure notice. She is the granddaughter of Jonathan and Margaret, born after the empire had already begun to fracture. She walks through the mansion now like a museum of broken intentions. Each step echoes differently, depending on which section of the house she enters. In the grand ballroom, silence feels ceremonial. In the library, silence feels sacred. In the tunnels below, silence feels like warning. She descends carefully. The air grows colder. Damp stone replaces polished marble. Here, she finds what the family never spoke about. Boxes of documents, old financial records, letters never sent, photographs faded into sepia memory, and one final ledger. In it, her grandfather's handwriting appears shaky near the end. We built too much for life to fill. A house without proportion becomes a mirror, and eventually, a mirror shows only absence. Above her, thunder rolls again, and the mansion groans, not like a building, but like something remembering it was once alive. Evelyn returns upstairs. The rain has intensified. Water now enters through broken sections of the roof, forming small rivers across marble floors. She stands in the center of the foyer where it all began, where wealth once entered in waves, where power once felt infinite. Now only water remains, and silence. The Hartwell estate is officially sold at auction for a fraction of its original worth. A preservation group later debates restoration, but the cost proves impossible. It is eventually designated a historical ruin. Tours are forbidden due to structural instability. Nature begins reclaiming it slowly. Ivy climbing columns, salt wind eroding carvings, birds nesting in chandeliers. Time, which the Hartwells tried to conquer with wealth, finally reasserts itself without resistance. Today, the mansion stands as both warning and memory. Locals say on quiet nights, you can still hear footsteps in empty corridors. Not ghosts, but echoes of ambition that never learned how to stop growing. Evelyn leaves the estate on the morning after the foreclosure. She does not look back immediately, but when she does, she sees something simple. The mansion is no longer rising, no longer falling, just existing, as if waiting for someone else to decide what it meant. And in that final image, one truth lingers over the Atlantic coast like mist. Money can build monuments that outlive men, but it cannot guarantee they will survive them.